Keeper of the Lost Cities, Exile, Chapter 29. I don't understand, Sophie said, as Elvin set her down on her giant canopied bed in one of Everglen's enormous upstairs guest rooms. It was the same bed she'd woken up in when she'd nearly faded away. How can I be faded? I'm wearing an excess. That's what I'm trying to figure out. He grabbed her wrist, squinting at the meter on the underside. Did you do anything differently during the leap? I wrapped some of my concentration around Alden to make sure I brought him home safe. But my nexus is supposed to keep me together no matter how much I concentrate, right? That's what it's designed for. She looked away as Elvin flashed orange around her wrist, not wanting to trigger another headache. The nexus is working, Elvin said after a second. Then there has to be some mistake. Oh, there's no mistake. See for yourself. He handed her a silver mirror from the dressing table. Sophie's eyes widened. All her color had been washed away, leaving her lips and cheeks the same pale white as her skin. Even her eyes looked more gray than brown. Don't worry, it looks worse than it is. And when it's serious, your skin starts to turn translucent. And when it's deadly, you're practically clear. There were parts of you I could barely see when Fitz found you last time. Sophie shuddered. He can fix it, right? Yeah, I just have to make up some of that limbium-free fade fuel that Kessler came up with. And in the meantime, I want you to drink this. He handed her a bottle of youth and tried to rest. He smeared some purple balm on her burn and wrapped her hand in a damp silk cloth. I have to go take care of Alden. Will you be all right? Sophie nodded. Is he going to be okay? Of course. He's a little beat up, but it's nothing I can't handle. Just try to relax. I'll be back in a few. She downed the bottle of youth, trying not to stare at her pale hand as she set the bottle on the bedside table. She was going to be fine. She didn't even feel different, just tired and sore. She closed her eyes and leaned against the pillow, hoping to get some much-needed sleep. But the nightmares refused to let her rest. Fire and chaos from Finton's memories, madness and mayhem from Prentice, all the horrors she'd seen during her probes, mixed with her own fears and sandwiched together into the ultimate horror show in her mind. But the worst was a memory she didn't remember seeing. Prentice strapped to a chair in a round room with projections on the walls. Sophie had been there once, when Alden brought her to Quinlan's office in Atlantis. But this time all the screens projected the same image, the sign of the swan. Prentice stared quietly at his lap as Quinlan circled him, shouting questions. Finally, Quinlan wrung his hands and reached for Prentice's temples. Prentice didn't struggle, didn't resist, didn't do anything except stare at the person whose eyes Sophie was seeing the memory through. Alden. Sophie could feel Alden's anger and sadness as Prentice thrashed and screamed, and she jolted awake, hoping to bury the devastated memory so deeply in her mind that it would never resurface. But she had a feeling it would haunt her the same way it must be haunting Alden. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you, Fitz said, making her jump. No, it wasn't you, she said, when she could breathe normally again. I just had a bad dream. He sat next to her on the bed. Sorry. She shrugged. How's your dad? Sedated. Elvin needed to do some deep tissue repair to his head wound, so he put him under. But he's going to be okay, according to Alvin, and Bullhorn's not freaking out either, so I guess he's right. Banshees only scream when someone was in mortal danger, though it was worse when they lay down next to someone. That meant death was far too close. What happened down there? Fitz asked quietly. Pretty much one disaster after another. I'll say. He held up a small blue vial with an atomizer. Elvin made this for you. Breathe in. He sprinted his eyes near her nose, and Sophie inhaled the medicine, coughing as the tingly moisture hit her sinuses. Just like old times, Fitz said sadly. I used to sit right here, giving you a dose every hour, watching the bits of color slowly return to your face. and hoping you'd wake up." "You did?" He nodded. If she could have blushed, he would have. "Then of course you woke up during one of the few times my mom forced me to get some rest." He grinned, but there was still sadness in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Fitz. It's not your fault, though you really know how to give me a heart attack. When your transmissions cut away today, I almost leaped to Eternalia and banged on the counselor's doors until they took me to you guys." "I'm glad you didn't do that." "Me too, I guess, though it looks like you could have used some help." Sophie stared at her hands, relieved to see a hint of pink returning to her fingertips. "Elvin said it's not a big deal like this time." "Here, that's what he told me too. But he also said I have to make you wear this." Before she could react, he grabbed her left arm and clamped something teal and sparkly around her wrist. "It's Biana's old nexus. Elvin wants Elvin wants to be extra careful." Sophie scowled as he twisted the jeweled cuff until it clicked, leaving her wrist covered in pink and purple flowers. Great! Now she had two nexuses. "How long will I have to wear it for?" "Until he can figure out why you faded." It had to be the stress. Maybe. He fidgeted with the bottle of medicine. "You really can't tell me what happened? Or what you were doing in exile?" His transmission felt like a hot poker stabbing her brain. "Still too loud?" he asked when she winced. Sophie nodded. "Sorry. Hopefully Sir Tegan can figure out what's wrong." "Here," Sophie told him, hoping the same thing. She was hoping even harder that the problem wasn't with her. "I never should have let you go with Alden," Grady practically growled as he and Adeline helped Sophie up the stairs at Havenfield. Sandor trailed behind, grumbling about how nothing would have happened if he'd been allowed to do his job. Adeline squeezed Sophie's hand. "Elvin said she's going to be fine, and he'll check her again in the morning to be safe. Maybe we should just have him move in." Sophie felt her jaw drop slightly as Adeline smiled at her joke. Since when was Adeline the calm one? The good news had been that Elvin didn't find anything wrong with her, and he tested her every imaginable way. The bad news was he had no idea why she'd faded, or why she kept getting headaches, or any of the other weird things that she'd finally told him about. All he could do was insist on weekly checkups until he either figured it out or the problems went away. "Besides, I don't think we really had a choice," Adeline added quietly. Alden was on assignment from the council. "Yes, and I suspect there were other forces involved too." Grady gave Sophie a look, and she became very interested in her feet. She didn't have the energy for another debate about the Black Swan, especially since after there was a chance now that Jolie had been involved with them. Could her death have had something to do with the Black Swan after all? Even if it wasn't a murder, Sophie would have to find out, though she had no idea where to start. They left her alone to shower and change, and Sophie hoped the subject was dropped. But when Grady and Adeline came back to tuck her in, Grady kissed her good night and whispered, "Please be careful, Sophie. I just don't think you realize who you're dealing with. I am not going to say anything else. Just rest." He left without another word. Adeline handed her Ella and brushed a few strands of hair off her forehead. "You really do need sleep, Sophie. Are you sure I can't make you some slumberry tea?" The last thing Sophie wanted was to close her eyes and relieve any more nightmares, but fading again had renewed her resolve. No sedatives. Adeline frowned, but didn't argue as she kissed Sophie's cheek. Iggy settled on Sophie's pillow, and Adeline turned off the lights and left them alone. But when the sound of Adeline's footsteps had disappeared, Sophie crept out of bed and recorded all of the crazy things she'd seen in Finton's and Prentice's mind into her memory log. The images were even more terrifying on paper, and she shoved the book out of sight, grabbing her spy ball before burying herself under her covers. "Show me Mr. Focal," she whispered, not surprised when it flashed unknown. She wasn't really in the mood to see him anyway. She needed something that didn't involve broken minds, the Black Swan, or exiled prisoners of fire and doom. "Show me Connor, Kate, and Natalie Freeman," she whispered. The silver orb flashed, revealing her dad, mom, and sister, snuggled together on the couch eating popcorn and store-bought cookies. Movie night was a Foster family tradition, and Sophie soaked up the normal scene, hoping it would fill her dreams. Then something caught her eye. A floppy-eared, beagled puppy curled in her sister's lap. One of the few requests Sophie had made with Alden left to relocate her family was to get them a house with a yard big enough for them to finally get the dog they'd always wanted. She was happy to see they finally had it, but it hurt too, so much more than she ever thought it would. Tears burned her eyes and she grabbed Iggy and nuzzled his fuzzy nose, trying not to feel so alone and afraid, and wishing she could go back to the time when she didn't have to worry about things like fading and kidnappers and memory breaks. It helped a little, but what finally helped her regain control was Sylvie's quiet voice filling her mind. "Come, friend." Sylvie repeated the words, transmitting a strangely soft warmth, and Sophie sank into the feeling, letting it wrap around her consciousness like a blanket. For the first time in a long time, she drifted off into a dreamless